In the summer of 2004, a young man named Brent Jeffs filed a lawsuit against his uncle, Warren Jeffs, regarding sexual abuse he'd suffered at his hands during the 1980s. A prominent figure in the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ and Latter-day Saints, Jeffs was largely unknown to the public. But this one act of bravery on the part of Brent would soon open the floodgates to all sorts of allegations, along with several indictments. But who exactly was Warren Jeffs, and what had led him to this point in his life? In this video, we aim to shed light on these questions and more as we explore the life and crimes of Warren Jeffs. Born in Sacramento, California on December 3, 1955, Warren Steed Jeffs spent much of his childhood residing outside of Salt Lake City, Utah. At birth, he was more than 2 months premature. His mother, Marilyn Steed, was one of his father's many wives. Jeff's father, Rulon, was a Salt Lake City native and the son of a first-generation Mormon fundamentalist named David William Ward Jeffs, whose life was largely kept secret as he practiced polygamy, which is still illegal in the US even today. Rulon was raised as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or the FLDS Church, but was not introduced to the teachings of Mormon fundamentalism until he was almost 30. At the time of Rulon's death in 2002, he was 92 years old, and reportedly had 65 wives and 65 children, although this is disputed, with some sources claiming he had 19 or 20 wives. The number of children he had during his lifetime has been said to be as high as 80. Many of Rulon's wives were children at the time of their union, with some girls being as young as 14. As for Warren Jeffs, he of course had the same religious upbringing as his father. In 1976, at the age of 21, he became the principal of Alta Academy, or FLDS private school, located near Little Cottonwood Canyon, 15 miles from Salt Lake City. Rulon had purchased the land the school was built on in 1964 and began building a home on the property 4 years later. What later became the academy was originally a 36-bedroom home meant for Rulon, his 8 wives at the time, and his numerous children. As for the school, it opened its doors to students in 1973 and had the motto, "Perfect obedience produces perfect faith," falling in line with Warren Jeffs' reputation for being a stickler for the rules and for discipline. A former pupil of the academy, Rebecca Muser, who spoke with the Salt Lake City Tribune, described the establishment as a representation of the Jeff family's efforts to miseducate the FLDS. At the age of 19, she married Rulon Jeffs, who was 85 at the time. The ceremony had taken place at the academy, and later in life, she would go on to testify against Warren and other predators in the FLDS. Recalling her time at the school, she stated, "For everything that we understood, it was a place for refuge for FLDS people. But what really went on was a miseducation that ultimately enslaved the FLDS people." In 1999, the FLDS sold the property. It then changed hands many times and was ultimately left to rot. In 2014, the school was demolished to make way for new housing. Jeffs, meanwhile, was a frail individual in childhood. He reportedly had a fondness for Hitler and quickly developed a taste for power that led him to use the church to advance his career within it. He would frequently be found watching others in the community and reporting any untoward behavior to his father, using the chaotic fallout to climb further inside Rulon's inner circle of the FLDS with the intention of one day being in charge. The FLDS Church is a specific sect of the Fundamentalist Mormon denominations that believe in the practice of polygamy. It was founded in the early 1900s following the creation of the 1904 Second Manifesto, which renounces the practice and saw the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints excommunicate members who refused to give up the practice. The origins of the FLDS Church as a distinct group can be traced back to the 1950s in the cities now known as Hilldale, Utah, and Colorado City, Arizona. The history of the FLDS has been plagued with controversy, and perhaps one of the most notable events it was swept up in was the Short Creek Raid, which occurred on July 26, 1953, at Short Creek, Arizona. At the time, the event, which involved the Arizona Department of Public Safety and Arizona National Guard taking action against the Fundamentalists, was described as the largest mass arrest of men and women in modern American history. On the morning of July 26, 1953, officers from the Department of Public Safety and soldiers from the National Guard entered Short Creek. The 400 FLDS members, which included around 263 children, had been tipped off about the raid and were found singing hymns in the schoolhouse while children ran and played outside. All but 6 individuals were taken into custody. The 6 who were released were found to not be members of the church. 150 of the children taken into custody were not allowed to return to their parents for over 2 years, while some parents never regained custody of their offspring. Although the Arizona governor of the time, John Howard Pyle, supported the actions of the National Guard and the Department of Public Safety, and even invited reporters to watch the raid with the authorities, it largely received criticism and negative attention. Pyle defended the event by stating that it was a monumentous police action against resurrection, and claimed that the FLDS was participating in the foulest conspiracy you could possibly imagine, which intended on producing white slaves. However, much of the media and the public disagreed with Pyle's version of events, with the Arizona Republic reporting the following day, by what stretch of the imagination could the actions of the Short Creek children be classified as insurrection? Were those teenagers playing volleyball in a schoolyard inspiring rebellion? Insurrection, well if so, an insurrection with diapers and volleyballs. Other media reports labelled the raid as odious and un-American, with some even noting that it was the first time the public had sympathised with the FLDS. The LDS Church, meanwhile, celebrated the raid. They labelled the Fundamentalists as a cancer and claimed that the actions taken by the authorities would prevent the FLDS from destroying society. The life of those inside the FLDS Church is a strict and harsh one, especially for women and girls. The main teachings of the church revolve around the importance of polygamous marriage, that men have been instructed by God to have numerous wives in order to receive the highest form of salvation. It is generally said that men should have a minimum of 3 wives to meet this requirement. Furthermore, women are not allowed to choose which man they marry. The church instead practices what is known as placement marriage, whereby young women, and in many cases young girls, are assigned a husband by the church leader, who is regarded as a prophet. The prophet, who is revered and above questioning, also has the power to remove wives from men. While photographs from the Short Creek raid show both women and men dressed in clothing that was fashionable at the time, the clothing worn by church members has become more conservative in the years since. Women are often seen in long-sleeved, ankle-length prairie dresses, which are homemade and usually in pastel colours. Their hair is kept long and can be styled in a number of ways, which seek to emphasize a softer, more oval-shaped face. Men's clothing, meanwhile, consists generally of a long-sleeved collared shirt and full-length trousers. Children with the FLDS are largely homeschooled, with Warren Jeffs ordering that parents remove their children from public schools in 2000, when he was the leader of the church. He also instructed parents to sever ties with both former members and non-members of the FLDS Church. It is generally believed that Jeffs did this to isolate the community even further and let him control the narrative. Children would only learn what he wanted them to learn. Girls are taught to be submissive to men, and that their role in life is to be an obedient wife and a baby maker, with a heavy emphasis on home economics. Very little historically accurate information is provided to the children overall. While their homeschooling program consists of lessons in reading, English, history, science and maths, they are taught that Jeffs is the President of the United States, and that the 1969 moon landing never occurred. Children are reportedly told that Neil Armstrong never set foot on the moon, because God guided him away from doing so. The notebooks that children use for class also have an image of Jeffs on the front. Several girls interviewed by ABC News in 2012 after leaving the church stated that they had no idea who Ronald Reagan was, were unaware of AIDS, and had never heard of Santa Claus. Girls in the church are taught to keep sweet, meaning they are to refrain from feeling or voicing negative emotions or else face punishment. In general, women and girls are treated as commodities to be possessed and traded, rather than being seen as human beings. Up until 2002, Jeffs held the position of counselor to the church leader. His father Rulon was still the head of the church, but following his death that year, Jeffs made himself his successor. Back in 1986, when Rulon first became the church's new prophet, he adjusted the structure of the community in such a way that he remained its one and only leader. However, in the late 90s, his health began to decline, and his son took over as his spokesperson following a stroke. Jeffs' official title in the FLDS community became President and Prophet, Seer and Revelator, along with President of the Priesthood, with this name coming from the fact Jeffs was now the head of the organization of all adult male church members who held the priesthood. Reportedly, after taking up his new position, Jeffs told other high-ranking church officials that his father's widows were out of bounds, stating, "Hands off my father's wives." He then told the widows themselves, "You women will live as if father is still alive and in the next room." Within the week, he'd married almost all of his father's widows. The only two who escaped their fate included a woman who refused to marry Jeffs, and was, as a consequence, prohibited from ever marrying again, and Rebecca Muser, the same woman who told the Salt Lake Tribune that she had married Rulon at the age of 19. She fled the FLDS compound, and later helped bring Jeffs to justice. At the time of his arrest, Jeffs had 79 wives, 24 of whom were minors at the time of their union. Jeffs was given much power after becoming the new prophet. He was allowed to perform and dissolve marriages, and as a form of punishment, he would separate men from their wives and children, giving them to another man. As well as this, during his time leading the church, Jeffs established the YFZ, which stands for the Yearning for Zion Ranch, a new FLDS community in West Texas. In 2004, he excommunicated 21 men from the church for disobedience, leaving them with nowhere to go and no one to turn to, as all they had known throughout their life was the church. Over the years, the church has excommunicated more than 400 teenage boys for supposed offences such as dating someone or listening to rock music. However, some former members have stated that this was done to eliminate competition, as there were not enough women for every man to have a minimum of 3 wives. 6 men filed a conspiracy lawsuit against Jeffs and a former Mohave County Deputy Sheriff named Sam Barlow, who was a close associate of Jeffs, for the systematic excommunication. Many of the young men and boys who are thrown out of the church struggle to fit into normal society. Dubbed lost boys, they often turn to drugs and alcohol and find it difficult to adapt to normal life. They have never had to pay rent or find a job, and are unfamiliar with many of the things that we take for granted in modern society. They struggle to fit in anywhere outside of the church. While Rulon was not a good man by any means, many have pointed out how much more controlling his son was in comparison. Rulon was described as a more forgiving leader, and would sometimes even allow community members to choose their spouses. Church members were allowed to dance, play, listen to music, have pets, and use mobile phones. But Jeffs wished to command every aspect of the lives of the church members, from what clothes they wore. He even banned the colour red, to how girls and women styled their hair, to what toys their children played with, and of course who became married to who. Jeffs also refused to allow his community to be exposed to anything from the outside world, be it school, television and media, or the internet. Shortly before his arrest, Jeffs' rulings became even more bizarre. He reportedly implemented a ban on children's toys and the consumption of corn, and then began ordering married couples to refrain from engaging in sex or any kind of physical contact. He instead picked 15 individuals from among the men he trusted to father the church's future children. If a woman wished to become a mother, she would not be able to conceive with her husband. Rather, she would have to approach one of the men Jeffs had appointed. He commanded that the intercourse be witnessed by 2 other men from the selected 15, as well as the woman's husband. Adding to the disturbing nature of this ritual is a statement by Charlene Jeffs, the estranged wife of Warren Jeffs' brother Lyle. In 2015, Charlene wrote during her custody dispute with Lyle that this doctrine, which forces women to have sex with seed-bearers, who were elect men of a worthy bloodline chosen by the priesthood to impregnate, husbands were no longer allowed to have children with their wives, but that it is the husband's responsibility to hold the hands of their wives while the seed-bearer spreads his seed. In layman's terms, the husband is required to sit in the room while the chosen man, or a couple of them, rape his wife or wives. Charlene also described the church's grim practice, dubbed the Law of Sarah, which is described by a former member of the church as being similar to a lesbian sex show, with Jeffs participating and sermonizing. Any woman who objected to being involved would be sent away to redeem themselves, and their children were removed from their care and given to other women. However, these were just 2 nightmarish items on a long list of grim allegations that would soon emerge about Warren Jeffs. During the years that Jeffs was in charge of the church, the FLDS tangled with more controversy than ever. In July of 2004, his nephew Brent filed a lawsuit alleging that Jeffs had raped him in the FLDS church's Salt Lake Valley compound in the late 1980s. According to Brent, in his memoir Lost Boy, he was subject to sexual abuse not just by Jeffs, but by other family members when he was around the age of 5 or 6. Furthermore, his sibling, Clayne, took his own life after accusing Jeffs of sexually assaulting him during childhood. 2 of Jeffs' nephews and 3 of his children, including his daughter Rachel, who wrote the book Breaking Free: How I Escaped Polygamy, the FLDS Cult, and My Father Warren Jeffs, have also publicly claimed that they were subject to sexual assault at his hands. Then, in the spring of 2005, an intelligence report written by the Southern Poverty Law Center added the FLDS Church to its list of hate groups due to its teachings. It condemns interracial relationships, and Jeffs himself is an outright homophobe and racist, stating, "The black race is the people through which the devil has always been able to bring evil unto the earth." About the LGBTQ community, he claimed in a 2001 sermon, "The people grew so evil, the men started to marry the men, and the women married the women. This is the worst evil act you can do, next to murder. It's like murder. Whenever people commit that sin, then the Lord destroys them." The center also cited Jeffs' opinions on women, violence, and the end of the world as reasons why the group was designated a hate group, and called the FLDS Church a white supremacist, homophobic, anti-government, totalitarian cult. The FLDS has also been suspected of trafficking young girls across state lines, and even across the US borders to Canada and Mexico, with the intention of marrying the children off and subjecting them to sexual abuse. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police speculates that the church trafficked over 30 minors from Canada to the US between the late 1990s and 2006, so that they could enter polygamous marriages with grown men. Frustratingly, media outlets in Canada noted that it's unclear whether or not the country's anti-human trafficking laws can be retroactively applied to cases prior to 2005. Notably, an inquiry lasting 3 years in British Columbia resulted in no charges. The authorities investigated the possibility that the FLDS were participating in sexual abuse, forced marriage, and human trafficking, and while it did affect the legislature, it did not affect the FLDS. In June 2005, just over a year after Brent Jeffs filed a lawsuit against his uncle, Warren Jeffs was charged in Mohave County, Arizona, with sexual assault on a minor and conspiracy to commit sexual misconduct with a minor. The latter charge came as a result of allegations that Jeffs had arranged the marriage of 14-year-old Alyssa Wall and her 19-year-old cousin, Alan Steed. Alyssa's story is incredibly harrowing, and just one of many to emerge from the FLDS church following Jeff's arrest. When she was just 13, she and her siblings were removed from their father after their mother was reassigned to a different man whom she was forced to marry. Alyssa resented the separation and refused to consider herself a Jessup, the surname of her mother's new husband. She still considered herself a Wall. Shortly afterwards, Jeffs announced that he had picked out the teenager's new husband, her cousin, 19-year-old Alan Steed. Alyssa recalled never liking Alan, whom she found unappealing and creepy. She remembered that he would often make fun of her, calling her tubby tuna, in reference to her weight, and was often seen smoozing the powerful leaders of the church while treading all over everyone else. At the time of this announcement, Rulon, Jeff's father, was still alive. Jeffs claimed that it was he who had decided upon the union. Despite her young age and everything she had been taught, Alyssa decided to question the arrangement. She spoke with Rulon, but he seemed confused by everything she was saying. By this time, the elderly man's health was in a steep decline, and words appeared to be foreign to him. Jeffs reportedly attempted to translate the things Alyssa was requesting, but did so in a way that twisted her words, as he claimed the 14-year-old believed she knew better than the prophet. Rulon simply told Alyssa, "Follow your heart." Armed with this mantra, she confronted Jeffs later on, who simply told her that her heart was in the wrong place. He was insistent that they go ahead with the union. Alyssa's marriage to Alan was nothing short of traumatic. Alyssa avoided him at all costs, going to bed fully dressed, staying up late into the night to complete her homework, and rising early. But she couldn't evade him forever. After being raped for the first time, she attempted to take her own life, but decided against this course of action, and instead vomited up the medicines she'd taken, which allowed her to survive. At the age of 15, Alyssa confronted Jeffs about her situation and begged for the union to be broken. But Jeffs, an angry and unsympathetic man, simply ordered her to return to her husband and told her that she would have to submit to his every desire. But Alyssa was unable to face her husband and refused to continue suffering abuse at his hands. She began sleeping in her truck and in the bushes, and would even take her vehicle out, driving around the dirt roads until daybreak, making sure she could avoid him at all costs. At the age of 17, Alyssa suffered her fourth miscarriage. Around this same time, her truck got a flat tire while she was out driving. She then saw a car approach her. She recalled, "I just thought, oh great, here it is. I've been caught and they're going to turn me into Warren." But the driver was instead a 25-year-old man named Lamont Bartow, who'd been forced from the church along with a few of his siblings during an excommunication of young men. The relationship between Alyssa and Lamont blossomed in secret. However, things became public when she became pregnant with his child. With no other options, Jeffs was forced to dissolve her union with Alan. Jeffs told her adultery was a sin you couldn't come back from. Alyssa remembered. Then he said to Alan, "Job well done," meaning he had done everything right. He was obedient and I was not. It lit a righteous fury in me. After all the times I had pleaded for help, I was the wicked one. She then decided to help in the legal proceedings against Jeffs, and the FLDS community turned against her as a result. Alyssa told ABC News, "They prayed for my demise. In their minds, testifying against the prophet was the worst thing I could have ever done, and therefore I was one of the worst people on this earth." Alan Steed would later be charged with first-degree felony rape, but he pled guilty to a charge of solemnizing a prohibited marriage, and was sentenced to 30 days behind bars. He then had 36 months of probation. In July 2005, a month after charges were laid against Jeffs, the Arizona Attorney General's office distributed wanted posters offering a $10,000 reward for information leading to the church leader's arrest and conviction. During this time, Jeffs had gone into hiding. He had last been seen near El Dorado, Texas in January of that year. On October 28th, his brother Seth was arrested under suspicion of harboring a fugitive. He was pulled aside as part of a routine traffic stop in Pueblo County, Colorado, but was found with almost $142,000 in cash and $7,000 worth of prepaid debit cards. An FBI agent would later testify against Seth. He claimed that Seth had told him he didn't know his brother's whereabouts, but that even if he did, he wouldn't give him away. Seth was ultimately convicted of harboring a fugitive on May 1st, 2006. He was given 3 years probation and forced to pay a $2,500 fine. Then in April of 2006, Utah issued an arrest warrant for Jeffs on felony charges of accomplice rape of a teenage girl between the ages of 14 and 18. A month later, the FBI placed him on its top 10 most wanted fugitives list and offered a $60,000 reward, which was shortly thereafter raised to $100,000. Another month passed, and in June, Jeffs returned to Colorado City to perform more marriage ceremonies that were believed to involve children. At around 9 o'clock on the evening of August 28, 2006, a highway trooper pulled Jeffs over on Interstate 15 in Clark County, Nevada. The temporary license plates on Jeffs' red 2007 Cadillac Escalade were not visible, and the trooper believed this would be a quick stop. Inside the vehicle, however, he found the wanted FLDS leader along with one of his wives, Naomi Jessup, and his brother Isaac. The trooper then found items he deemed to be highly suspicious: 4 computers, 16 mobile phones, various costume or disguise items, including 12 pairs of sunglasses and 3 wigs, and over $55,000 in cash. Unsurprisingly, all 3 individuals were pulled in for questioning, although Isaac and Naomi were later released. 3 days later, during a court hearing, still in Nevada, Jeffs waived extradition rights and agreed to return to Utah, where he would face 2 first-degree felony charges of accomplice rape. He was held in Washington County Jail while he awaited trial. In May and July of 2007, he was indicted in Arizona on 8 counts, which included sexual misconduct with a minor and incest. Jeffs' Utah trial began on September 11, 2007 in the city of St. George, and he was found guilty on both charges 2 weeks later, on September 25th. He was sentenced to 10 years to life and began serving his jail time at the Utah State Prison. However, 3 years later, on July 27, 2010, the Utah Supreme Court reversed the convictions and ordered a new trial, citing poor jury instructions, as they believed that the judge would have told the jury that Jeffs could not be convicted unless he intended for Alyssa's husband to rape her. In Arizona in 2008, Jeffs entered a not guilty plea to charges laid against him. He was accused of facilitating the marriages of 3 teenage girls to older men. In June of 2010, the Mohave County prosecutor requested that the charges be dismissed with prejudice, as Jeffs' victims no longer wanted to testify. He also noted that since the church leader had spent almost 2 years awaiting trial, he had spent more time behind bars than he would have if he was convicted. Knowing that Jeffs was also facing charges in Texas, the prosecutor stated that the Arizona trial would be impractical and unnecessary. On August 9, 2011, Jeffs was convicted in Texas of 2 counts of sexual assault of a child after being accused of forcing 2 teenage girls into spiritual marriage and fathering a child with one of them when she was just 15 years old. He was given life behind bars. The prosecutors had rested their case just 6 days earlier on August 3rd. The final piece of evidence they brought to the courtroom was an audio tape which featured Jeff raping a 12-year-old girl, his latest wife, whom he referred to as his heavenly comfort wife, and telling her to feel his presence, the Spirit of God. Perhaps adding to the idea that Jeffs appears to think highly of himself, is the fact that he acted as his own lawyer during his trial. He began his defense by speaking about religious freedom, a tirade that was cut short by the judge, Barbara Walther, who told him he clearly wasn't prepared to enter a defense, and that he had two choices: rest his case or begin calling witnesses. Jeffs attempted to request more time to prepare, but the judge denied him, stating she had already warned him how difficult it was to act as one's own defense. During the trial, Jeffs entered both the Bible and the Book of Mormon into evidence. He then asked his first witness, an FLDS member, to read lengthy verses from the latter. Both the prosecution and Judge Walters questioned Jeffs about what these passages had to do with his defense. The audio tape that was played by the prosecution towards the end of their presentation was one of several seized by authorities and submitted as evidence against Jeffs. Other recordings heard by the jury featured Jeffs saying that a good wife is trained for her husband and follows the spirit of peace, and referencing being close, a phrase used by the FLDS Church to describe sexual intercourse. The recordings had been made the day after he married a 14-year-old girl, the same girl who was impregnated by him at the age of 15. Jeffs was instructing the young girl and another wife on their new responsibilities as wives, telling them they were honourable vessels, property of your husband's kingdom and the kingdom of God on earth. Jeffs' journals were also entered into evidence. He had written that his child bride was pure and innocent and willing to obey, and that he had told her parents that their girl belonged to him. The prosecution also played another tape for jurors, which was another training session involving 12 girls. Reportedly, as this tape was played, Jeffs stood up in the courtroom and ranted about how a holy trust was being broken. However, both the jury and the judge were wearing headphones to listen to the audio, and his tirade went ignored. Instead, they heard Jeffs on tape saying disgusting things to the girls. Over the course of the trial, Jeffs made numerous outbursts and objected frequently, often on the grounds of religious freedom. However, the judge overruled all of his objections. Jeffs also attempted to have Judge Walther removed from the case on 3 separate occasions, but was denied each time. On March 27, 2007, it was reported that Jeffs had renounced his role as prophet of the FLDS Church. His brother, Nephi, quoted him as saying he was the greatest of all sinners, and that God had never called him to be a prophet. On November 7th, the Washington County Attorney's Office released video footage of a conversation that took place in jail between Jeffs and his visiting sibling. Jeffs renounced his place as leader of the church and claimed God had told him that if he revealed he was not the rightful leader and admitted to being a wicked man, he would still gain a place in the celestial kingdom. He also admitted to immoral actions with a sister and a daughter when he was 20 years old. On November 20th, almost 2 weeks following his conversation with Nephi, Jeffs formally resigned as the president of the FLDS Church. But he did not comment on his status as the group's prophet. Many FLDS members still see him as such today. In April of 2008, the YFZ Ranch, which Jeffs established in West Texas after his father's passing, was raided by authorities. They took legal custody of 416 children after a phone call was made on March 31st, in which a woman claimed a teenage girl had been married off to a 50-year-old man and given birth to his child. This call was later traced to a woman known as Rosita Swinton, who had a history of filing false police reports and had no connection with the FLDS Church. Those suspected of being minors were returned to the ranch when it could not be established whether or not they were the victims of abuse. During this raid, which had been signed off by Judge Walters, much of the evidence against Jeffs was collected, including the audio tapes and his journals. One journal entry reportedly read, "If the world knew what I was doing, they would hang me from the highest tree." In 2007, whilst in prison in Utah, Jeffs attempted to hang himself. During his early years behind bars, he spent much of his time participating in hunger strikes, which his attorneys claimed were for spiritual reasons. In August of 2009, a judge ruled that he be force-fed in prison. In 2011, he was taken to the hospital in critical condition after excessive fasting, but recovered after he was placed into a coma by doctors. He is currently behind bars at the Louis C. Powledge unit of the Texas Department of Justice, and is not eligible for parole until July 22, 2038, at which time he'll be 82 years old. Rebecca Muser, the older sister of Alyssa Wall, and the woman who was forced to marry 85-year-old Rulon Jeffs when she was just 19, testified against Warren Jeffs numerous times. During one testimonial, she showed up to court in a sleeveless red dress. Jeffs had banned the colour red and forced women in the church to cover themselves in long-sleeved, ankle-length dresses. For her, this was an act of defiance. Author Deborah Wireman, who penned the book Answer Them Nothing, about Jeffs and the FLDS Church, wrote about Rebecca's formidable court appearances, describing her as follows. As the wife of a former prophet, Rebecca had credibility compounded by her collected, steady, and unflappable demeanour in the witness box. In 2013, Rebecca wrote the memoir, The Witness Wall Read, the 19th wife who brought polygamous cult leaders to justice. Her sister Alyssa also wrote her own autobiography entitled Stolen Innocence, My Story of Growing Up in a Polygamous Sect, Becoming a Teenage Bride, and Breaking Free of Warren Jeffs. After fleeing the church, Rebecca married one of Rulon's grandsons, Ben Muser, who was a former church member and had several children with him before they divorced. Alyssa meanwhile appears to still be married to Lamont Bartow, with whom she has 2 children. In August of 2022, Fox 13 reported that a new command had been issued by Jeffs from prison. The decree called for some people to return to the FLDS church and to bring their children with them. It was distributed by one of his sons, Helaman Jeffs. The document stated, "Pray that Warren Jeffs will go free and he can meet you in the congregation soon. All peoples who desire to be members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints on earth." Before going on to add that baptisms and sealings in celestial plural marriage unions will take place for those the Lord revealeth to mortal keyholder Warren Steed Jeffs who is worthy. It also warns that some members may be thrown out of the church, stating, "I the Lord loveth all, yet I cannot allow sin living to dwell among my church membership any longer." It appears that Jeffs no longer believes he is a wicked man and a false prophet. He requested that church members send letters to him with photos and information about themselves and their families. While Jeffs has been known to send out commands and books to FLDS members, there had recently been a lull in these types of actions until now. Ex-church members have stated their concern with this new decree. One such woman, Brenda Nicholson, told Fox 13, "I have family members who have had their children taken away within the last few weeks. People are being told they are no longer worthy enough to have their children. Children are being taken and redistributed to others." She also added, "It's not what they want to do. They don't feel like they have a choice. There's no consent when it's coerced." The Utah Attorney General's office told Fox 13 News that it was aware of the decree and looking into it, but declined to comment at the time. According to former members of the group, the FLDS community prays on a daily basis for Jeff's release, hoping that he will break out of prison or be released. It is speculated that he continues to order his followers using coded messages and by using his brothers, who continue to visit him. Authorities believe his siblings may be using disguised recording devices to carry messages back to the compound. As of 2018, the church is believed to have 10,000 active members, many of whom unfortunately believe that Jeffs is innocent. In June of 2002, Netflix released a documentary about Warren Jeffs and the FLDS. In the trailer, one line in particular sums up Jeffs' attitude towards his church. Warren Jeffs took over this religion and turned it into money and power and sex. Jeffs appears as an unsympathetic, power-hungry egotist who thinks he is untouchable. To this day, he rules over the FLDS by invoking fear, causing suffering, and using the abuse of others to his own advantage. In recent years, it's reported that the FLDS community is torn. Some members believe him and some do not. And for the latter, the fact that he's gone is a perfect opportunity to start afresh and begin the healing process. As they try to put their past and their pain behind them, they look towards a bright future full of hope.